Alright, hey everybody, how's it going? I just want to make this very quick video. I say very quick, this might take a little while, but there's a lot of misconceptions that you need a lot of profiles with the RetroTINK 5X, which isn't really true. I'm going to show you here the profiles that I have on my unit. So I have one for Mega Drive, one for Master System, one for PS1, one for PS2, one for the Super Famicom, Xbox, Saturn, Dreamcast, and Wii. Today we're going to be working with slot 10, which is currently empty. And I'm going to show you what you can actually do with a single profile. So for simplicity's sake, we are going to just use my Mega Drive. So I'm going to switch over to SCART RGB. So this is currently all stock, completely stock. To get the most out of this, I do recommend using the 240p test suite. Just so you can do a few of the extra little bits and bobs. So here we are with my favourite game of all time, the 240p test suite. This is not essential. You can get a lot of this done without the 240p test suite, but I do recommend using it. To begin with, we are going to do our ADC calibration. I'm on the most up-to-date firmware, the experimental firmware that you can find in the RetroTINK 5X Discord. So what I'm going to do is go into Plooge. Okay, so what I now want to do is just check a couple of things here now. For my Mega Drive, which is a Model 2, which is triple bypass modded, I found that the medium low pass filter is fine for me, so I'm going to stick with that. So in video ADC, what I'm going to do is start by reducing the Y offset until, I'm going to say about there, 14. I've got a lot of the black that is actually covered by this blue clipping area. Then what I'm going to do is start increasing the Y gain. I'm just kind of painting with broad strokes here, so you can see that I've got the Y gain to the point where the purple pretty much touches where the blue is. So I'm going to come out of this and then I'm going to go to EBU color bars. And as you can see, still we have the Y gain is just matching or just meeting where the blue is. So I'm happy with these two settings. Now we need to do the PB and the PR. So first off, I'm going to increase the PB gain. So we can see that the left side is clipping, but the right side isn't. So I'm going to increase PB offset by 1, and then that's fine. If I do a little bit more, that's a bit too much for now. So we just want these two colors to be just tickling, just like a little sprinkle of clipping. So we're going to do the same with PR, so increase the gain. So that's not too bad in all fairness, and I believe that, yeah. Now, there is a point where you're going to have to make a bit of a compromise. But what we can do is increase the clamp length to see if that helps at all. So we still got a tickle here. Try increasing it to 12. We are just not gonna get very far with this. So what I'm gonna do is knock it back down to 4. So we still get our tickles here. I'm gonna reduce. And how's that looking? So I can get them both looking about the same. I'm probably going to leave it about that. The right hand side is barely clipping. I'm seeing the occasional little smatter, but that's fine. I'll be happy with that. Okay, so there we go. That's our ADC done. What I would advise doing at this point is just saving it. So I'm just going to save this as slot 10 for now. Now we are currently in 1080p fill mode. Now this is generally the mode that I use when I'm doing my regular old gaming. So what I can then do is go down to grid, and we're using generic 4x3 at the moment. Alright, So this is our grid. We can now use this in order to center the image. Now, the way that I do this, you can either use a capture card and some kind of fanciness, or you can do what I do and use the menu here as your guide. Now, I'm going to assume that the menu is put dead center in the middle of the screen. So what I'm going to do is count there are 5 white squares either side of the menu. We need to kind of shift this over a little bit. I'd say that's pretty much dead center, or as close as I can get. This is 4 above, well, 4 above and a little bit below. I'm going to say that's about center. Now in this case, because the Mega Drive is generally, most games are 320 pixels wide, I'm only going to sort out the centering for this mode in generic 4:3. Because what happens is, if I adjust this and change it to 256, it's going to be off center. So I don't really care too much. Again, with generic modes, it's all about getting a compromise. So now I have done that mode. So this is 1080p fill. I'm going to move over to 1080p over by using the button. I am using the fancy remote here. You don't have to do that. You can use the regular remote. Okay, so let's get this centered for 1080p over. I'm also not doing any cropping here. Right, so now last one, when it loads, is 1080p under. Now this is the mode that I use for most of my recordings, and then I just scale it up in post. Okay. Now, let's save our good work. We're in 1080p under mode, so what I'm now going to do is look at our optimal settings. So this is where the secret lies. So all of these settings for scaling and crop are unique to those generic 4:3 profiles, which in themselves are unique to the output resolutions. So you've essentially got profiles within profiles within profiles. Let's change our sampling mode to generic, to Genesis/Saturn 320. I am going to come out of this and just have a look at our beautiful little Artemio here. Now, I do recommend not using the auto phase detect if you are massively bothered about shifting, which I am. What can happen is, as you're playing a game, your phase can readjust. So I'm gonna go through here and check which phase looks the best, which to me looks to be 2 of 4. So let's return to grid, and we're using 320 mode. Okay, so now let's readjust the position here. So can you see all of these settings have changed? Now I'm going to have a little look at cropping, but it's not ideal, and I'll show you why. So left and right are fine, but from the top, you can never quite get it right. And this is just the way that the RetroTINK works. So there's a small black line there. So I either have to choose between having that little bit of overscan or cutting off a little bit of the image. It's up to you. It'd be nice if we could just do like a per pixel thing, but I understand that the chipset is a little bit limited. But there we are. We now have a profile set up for 1080p under. So this is now pixel perfect. Now, if you want to use optimal sampling as well as aspect ratio correction, there is an option. So this is how I have mine set up. So I'm going to change my output resolution to 1080p fill. 2 is good. Now, if we have a look at scaling and crop, can you see this number next to the crop start or underneath the 4:3? That says 0.97. That means our aspect ratio is not dead on. So we can use the V size, reduce that by 2%, and we've got a number 1, which means we are all groovy. That is now 4:3 corrected. So let's just readjust the position on the screen. Not going to be perfect, but that's close enough. Now I'm just going to double check my phase to make sure that's as dead on as we can get it, which looks to be about right. So there we go. That's our 1080p fill mode. So if you look now, I'm going to switch between 1080p U, which is nice and pixel perfect, 1080p fill, which is aspect ratio corrected. Next one to do is 1080p over. So let's just come out of this and have a look at Artemio. Now, Artemio is not going to be perfect. Let's see if we can get a better looking phase. Yeah, it's about as close as we can get. Oh no, that's about as close as we can get. It's not perfect, but it'll do. So now we have all three sampling modes set up, good to go. And that's going to be independent of resolution. So I have scaling and sampling set up for generic 4:3, optimal for 320 pixels, and now finally what we're going to do is 256. But the issue is with this, what we're going to have to do is use the grid, or the checkerboard rather. And I'm going to go back to 1080p under. So this isn't looking too hot. It's because we need to select Super Nintendo PC Engine. So what I'm going to do is just set kind of a random sampling setting at the moment. And what we're then going to need to do is increase this ADC samples per line option. Because we want this whole thing to be, well, we want to basically get rid of this bar, this grey bar in the middle of the screen. So let's start increasing. If the grey bar disappears, we can adjust the phase detect till it comes back. So there we go. So it's still there. Let's increase it again. It's nearly gone. Aha. So that bar is gone. Okay, let's change that to auto and let's go back to the grid. We'll set this to 256. Gonna save our good work. And there we have the 256 profile for 1080p under. Now we're going to do the same thing with 1080p fill. Now I know that this console clock at the bottom should have been 342, so I'm going to increase that to 342. Scaling and crop, so you can see 0.97 again, so we're going to need to reduce until we get to number 1. You can readjust the phase. This is why I say amend your phase afterwards. I think 2 might be okay, you know? But we still need to do the cropping. Alright, and now finally we just have 1080p over to go. And we're going to increase this until we get to 342. Alright, won't go any further, so here we go. If we won't go any further, I'm going to reduce this back to its default value, which is 2046. Instead, I'm going to use the H interp size until we get to 342. There we go. Okay, now what I'm going to do is reset this to 1080p fill. Let's just reset everything to generic 4:3, and we're going to go through all of our profiles. So let us play a game that no one's ever heard of before. Okay, so as you can see, this is us in 1080p fill. This should be as centered as possible. In 1080p over, looking pretty damn good. And then 1080p under. There we go, they're all set up. So we know that Sonic the Hedgehog is a 320 pixel wide game. So let's change over to Mega Drive. So you can see there's still those 2 little lines at the top and bottom. just so you can see what that would look like if I wanted to get rid of them in normal gameplay. You can still do that. You might prefer that. In fact, I kind of prefer that at the moment. Isn't taste strange? If you ever want to try and fine-tune the phase, you can always use the ADC phase option here. That might be okay, actually. Yeah, you can try that. So there we are. This is now Sonic the Hedgehog. Pixel perfect scaling, looking absolutely banging. But hey, what if you want to play in 1080p fill? Well, we can just change over to 1080p fill here. Oh, look, I forgot to actually do the cropping. We can do that now, thanks to the handy border. And now you have optimal sampling with aspect ratio correction as well. If I'm ever feeling saucy enough for a bit of optimal sampling, this is probably what I would use rather than it being pixel perfect. I just like having the 4:3 aspect ratio correction. Then we have 1080p over. Now again, this isn't going to be perfect just because of the way that 1080p over is sampled. Now, one thing to mention is the ADC does carry over in between profiles, so this may also need some adjustment. It's not perfect by any means, but from a distance, it looks okay. It would be nice if we could get proper dead-on phase sampling for 1080p over, but it is what it is. So if you want to play at 5x mode with pixel perfect pixels, this is how you can do it. If you think this looks okay, go for it. So how about something that is 256 pixels wide? So let's resort back to 1080p. H sampling, and we will revert to generic 4:3 and 1080p fill. So here we are with Sunset Riders, looking very dark and rubbish, but that's just how Sunset Riders is. The guy didn't set himself on fire. Anyway, less of that. So as you can see again, we have 1080p fill, 1080p over. So again, if you want to use something like your scan lines here, this is a great mode to use. And then finally 1080p under. But that's all set up for you. That's good to go, good to use, happy days. If you want to use Pixel Perfect, then all we need to do is just move over to that SNES/PC Engine preset. And that, to be honest, looks pretty damn good. What? Not today. Bear in mind I'm dealing with some lag here, so I'm not going to be the expert gamer that I normally am. And then we can jump to 1080p fill, and look at that. Pixel perfect, but also aspect ratio corrected. And then finally 1080p over. You want that lovely 5x scale with nice sharp pixels. Neatly. I mean, this mode actually looks really good. Yeah, there you go. That's... ah, bollocks. So that's it. That's how I would set up my RetroTINK profile. So essentially I have a profile for generic 4:3 at 3 resolutions, a profile for 256 optimal sampling at 3 resolutions, and finally 320 pixels at 3 resolutions. If I said 4 resolutions originally, I meant 3. So you've essentially got 9 profiles there, all within a single profile, each with their own scaling and cropping settings. The only things that matter, that will carry over in between each setting, is your ADC settings. So that means you only actually have to set that up once. But anyway, I hope that's helpful for you. I didn't know this at first, and I think this might help revolutionize the way that you make your profiles. Let me know how you found this. Thanks for watching, take care, and goodbye.